Good evening to all. I invite Honorable Finance Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman for welcome remarks and for introducing the speaker for Arun Jaitley Memorial Lecture today.
Honorable Prime Minister, Senior Minister Shanmugaratnamji, distinguished invited guests, we are gathered here for the Arun Jaitley Memorial Lecture. It was in August 2019 that Sri Arun Jaitley passed away. PM Modi and Government of India, in Arun Jaitleyji's honor, named National Institute of Financial Management after Sri Arun Jaitley. It was also decided that a lecture in his memory will be held annually. However, because of COVID, we could not commence this in 2020 or in 2021. A few words on Sri Arun Jaitley. His remarkable political career, which began with a 19-month imprisonment because he was protesting against the emergency, his successful legal practice, his great debates in our parliament, the ease with which he served as a minister in many ministries and departments, both under PM Vajpayee and under PM Modi. So much can be said about each one of these. Guided by PM Modi, he was the person behind two major reforms introduced in the earlier tenure of our government under Prime Minister Modi: the GST and the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code. It was during his tenure that the date of the presenting of our annual budgetary statement in the Parliament was advanced to 1st February from end February. Also, to present one budget in the place of two, the railway and the general budget, was a decision taken during his tenure. He valued the good discourses. He never rejected an invitation to address a good thinking audience, be it in a university or a think tank or even in a college. His interest in cricket, his love for fine things in life, fountain pens or watches, we all know of it. A great connoisseur of food, he could name the best restaurants in at least 25 cities across the world. He had friends across party lines and was always ready to help. In recognition of the contribution Sri Arun Jaitley made to the nation, the service to the nation, and in order to perpetuate his memory, Ministry of Finance, Government of India is instituting this annual lecture series titled the Arun Jaitley Memorial Lecture. We are grateful and happy that the first Arun Jaitley Memorial Lecture is being delivered by Sri Tharman Shanmugaratnam. Sri Shanmugaratnam is Senior Minister in Government of Singapore. He was previously Singapore's Deputy Prime Minister and before that, Finance and Education Minister. He is concurrently the Chairman of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the nation's central bank and financial regulator. Mr. Shanmugaratnam has spent his entire working life in public service, in roles principally related to economic and social policies. Again, Mr. Shanmugaratnam co-chaired the G20 High-Level Independent Panel on Financing Future Security from Pandemics in the year 2021. He currently co-chairs the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, which is aimed at re-envisioning and proposing solutions to overcome a growing crisis of access to clean water. He is also a member of the United Nations High-Level Advisory Board on Effective Multilateralism. He also has led the G20 Eminent Persons Group on Global Financial Governance. Mr. Shanmugaratnam chairs the group of 30, an independent global council of economic and financial leaders. He also chairs the Global Education Forum and the advisory board for the UN's Human Development Report. He earlier chaired the International Monetary Fund and Financial Committee, IMFC, for 4 years. He was the first Asian chair. I'm indeed grateful and happy that the first lecture is being delivered by Sri Tharman Shanmugaratnam. Thank you.
His Excellency, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Her Excellency Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, Mrs. Sangeeta Jaitley, and family members, Excellencies and distinguished guests, many of whom are friends and close associates of Mr. Arun Jaitley. It is a real honor and privilege for me to be speaking at this inaugural lecture named after one of India's most outstanding public leaders. I knew Arun when I was the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. We had many exchanges, and he left a deep impression on me, an impression of his character. He was, on the one hand, a person of unusual humility and generosity, but he was also a person who clearly had self-belief. He had that unusual combination of humility and self-belief. And that was part of the reason why Arun Jaitley was a man for all seasons and all parties. It is how he marshaled through some of the most complex reforms, the GST being the most important, of course, bringing all stakeholders together, making compromises, building bridges, finding consensus. And that legacy of Arun Jaitley will surely live on in India and for many of us around the world. And it is a legacy that will offer many lessons for how we address future challenges. We have entered an era of profound fragility globally. We in fact have a confluence of fragilities, a confluence of insecurities, geopolitical, existential, economic, and social at the same time. We know the geopolitical. We know that the risk of escalating geopolitical tensions and conflicts is greater than it has been at any time since the end of the Cold War. The global system of rules and norms aimed at preserving peace and territorial integrity was never perfect. It was always imperfect. But what's happening in Ukraine is a major rupture and will have ramifications that go beyond just another conflict or another war. And the ramifications could be catastrophic. Second, we have a prospect of stagflation, higher inflation, and slow growth for a period of time, not just for a year or a year and a half. And in the advanced countries, there's a very real prospect of a recession. in the near term. The risks of high inflation preceded Ukraine, but are of course now accentuated. And critically, although the levels of inflation and having slow growth or recession for a while doesn't constitute the most important problem in the world, critically, it will erode political capital at the time when we need political capital within nations and globally to address much larger challenges, including the challenges of climate change, a water crisis, and shrinking biodiversity. So that's the second challenge, stagflation. The third challenge, as I've just mentioned, is that the global commons are deteriorating, and they're deteriorating at an accelerating pace. The shifts in the environment, which are structural, not just episodic, not just random fires and extreme heat waves or droughts, these structural shifts in the environment have combined with the increased risk of global scale spread of infectious diseases, epidemics and pandemics. And we now have to live with that threat as part of the world that we are in. And it'll be a threat to lives and livelihoods for many years to come. In the short term, the unpalatable reality is that we will have to rely more on fossil fuels to ensure energy security and to prevent sharply higher energy prices. But it means that it's all the more important that we double down on our medium to long-term strategies of making a transition to a low-carbon energy future and making a transition to new ways of behavior and the circular economy that Prime Minister Modi has emphasized and spoken about. All the more important that we double down on these medium to long-term shifts in behavior, shifts in policies, mobilization of investments to achieve a sustainable future. And the fourth challenge, coming out of the geopolitical tensions, higher food prices, energy prices, fertilizer prices, coming out of all the larger global challenges we face, is that the developing world, a significant part of the developing world, now faces the risk of a rollback in the economic and social gains that were very painfully achieved in recent decades. Development is going to be more difficult. And the experience of the last 2 years because of COVID has set us back much further in the developing world. 1.5 years of lost learning, in some cases more. It's not just a short-term loss, it's a loss for the long term, for all the young children who are affected. And we risk the permanent scarring of the young, further disempowerment of girls, because many of the girls are not going back to school, and we risk something more than that. We risk civil wars and conflicts between neighboring states. So we have a confluence of challenges that is unprecedented in its combination, and it's not here for the short term. This is not a perfect storm. It's not a perfect storm in the traditional sense of a conjuncture of one-off events or random shocks. We have entered a perfect long storm, structural insecurities that are going to be with us for some time to come. Geopolitical, existential, economic, social. And we cannot wish these insecurities away. Nor can we pretend that today's state of multilateralism is going to enable us to address these insecurities. We do need a new and stronger multilateralism, more effective in meeting both the nation's own interests and our collective interests. The overriding priority must be to avoid a polarized world. that the world is becoming more multipolar is irreversible. And that's a mark of success of the global economy. There are many more poles of success and influence. That's irreversible. But we must prevent a multipolar world from becoming a polarized world. That has to be our overriding objective. It requires a new strategic understanding amongst the major nations, an understanding that has to be shaped by what they share in common, what their common interests are, which is to provide security from climate change and pandemics, to provide peace, and to avoid global financial crises. These are challenges that every nation faces. Every nation has an interest in avoiding this, avoiding climate change, going beyond the bounds of what will be safe, avoiding pandemics, preserving peace, and avoiding major financial crises. And we have to shape strategic understanding between the major nations around those common interests and define multilateralism on that basis. The rules of the game will have to be updated to make sure that trade is fair, that there's no harmful competition. Supply chains are being diversified, not just because of COVID. It was happening before COVID, and COVID has accelerated it. But let's not retreat from an open, integrated global order, which has been hugely beneficial to all nations, including the largest nations. It will not assure us of peace. Economic interdependence does not assure us of peace, but it makes peace much more likely than a world of increasingly decoupled markets, data, payments, technologies. We must stay open and stay integrated. Achieving this will require geopolitical skill and leadership. And India will be taking over the G20 presidency next year at this very important time, when leadership is required and new directions are required, including new directions in the existing multilateral institutions, like the World Bank, like our multilateral development banks, which have to be refashioned for a world that is fundamentally different from the time when they were originally established. A world where the challenges of the global commons are central to every nation's future, including especially developing nations, in addition to poverty alleviation. India itself is looking to its next 25 years, having reached 75 years of independence. It has emerged with strength from COVID, and it is now looking to create, as Prime Minister Modi says, the new India. And India's challenges in the next 25 years are enormous, despite all the global challenges we face. In fact, India has greater opportunity than any other major nation in the next 25 years. But realizing the opportunity will require higher ambition in growth, higher ambition in social inclusivity, and high ambition in developing a sustainable society and economy. It also requires greater urgency. India will have to accelerate the pace of reforms that has been started and reorient the role of government. But India is able to build on the very distinctive achievements of recent years. I would say dramatic achievements of recent years. Two in particular. First, almost unique internationally, the large-scale implementation of the large-scale provision of basic social amenities to hundreds of millions of people within a short space of time. Hundreds of millions of people, basic social amenities, toilets, electrification, of all villages. 98% of India is now having access to electricity. Perhaps not the entire day, but it's got access to electricity which didn't exist before. Clean cooking gas, when in fact hundreds of millions of people depended on pollutive forms of ways of cooking in the past, with great impact on their health, particularly the women. Primary healthcare centers, 150,000 primary healthcare centers being set up all around the country to provide close access wherever people live, all as part of Ayushman Bharat, public health assurance. Most recently, functioning water taps and water pipes all across the country. Work in progress, but a very important task. And all of these, if you think about them, toilets, electrification, clean cooking gas, functioning water taps, particularly empower women. It's the women who've been spending hours every day queuing up for water. They particularly empower women. And I know Prime Minister Modi started this in Gujarat some years ago, but this is an immense historical task, correcting a legacy of neglect for the poor, for ordinary people in the rural areas, and for girls and women. Immense historical task. So that's the first unusual achievement of recent years that India builds on as it looks to the future. The second, equally dramatic, is what has been achieved to provide for digital and financial inclusion. Again, on an immense scale. In a country with 29 different states, with different democratically elected governments, and vastly differing stages of development. Immense achievement. And I don't need to elaborate about it, but the India stack, starting with Aadhaar and UPI, Unified Payments Interface, so that everyone can make digital payments, is a remarkable achievement on a global scale. There's been no financial innovation of that scale and speed achieved in any other country. We now need the same boldness of political and social vision, the same attention to implementation, the same ability to cut through red tape, the same ability to mobilize the ground, and to have center and states work closely together to address the very important challenges of the next 25 years. First, creating vastly more jobs, including jobs for the low-skilled and semi-skilled. Second, creating a more sustainable economy and society, and demonstrating to the world how this can be achieved, whilst continuing to develop. And thirdly, underpinning everything else, investing in social mobility, investing in quality in education and basic healthcare, so as to create opportunities for all. In other words, India needs not just an India stack, but a social development stack, going beyond the provision of basic social amenities, the toilets, electricity, clean cooking gas, and so on. Very important, but going beyond that to now develop opportunity for people to, on a self-determining basis, achieve better lives through education, better healthcare. And it can be achieved because the same almost missionary zeal for implementing reforms on the ground, the same ability to work with all stakeholders can be applied to this very large task of upgrading the majority of young Indian persons' futures, starting from young and skilling them through life. It needs urgency. As Prime Minister Modi said on India's 75th anniversary, this is India's Amrit Kal, its critical moment. As he put it, we have to start now. We don't have a moment to lose. And the next decade will be critical. not just the next 25 years. The next decade will be critical because there is a race against demography. There's a very large group of young people, as large as China faced in an earlier phase of history. 580 million Indians are below the age of 50, or below the age of 25. That's a large number of people who need to be quickly skilled, given confidence, to earn their own success in the workforce. For those of us who are from outside India, those who are economists, academics, observers, well-meaning observers, we must recognize the complexity of these challenges. And part of the complexity comes from the fact that India is now unraveling what are very deep legacies that go back to the earliest pre-independence years, and in some instances, go back to the colonial era. A legacy of economic thinking and strategies that from the earliest years of independence relied on state control of the economy and complex and frequently changing regulation. Very strong legacy, which has not disappeared from India. A legacy of preference for capital-intensive industry rather than labor-intensive industry, and inadequate attention paid to job creation. A legacy going back to the pre-independence years of letting people live with very low incomes in the rural areas for all their lives, rather than finding ways to reform and allow people to be freed up to move into more productive activity. And a legacy of neglect, again going back to the pre-independence years, neglect of basic education and healthcare for a large part of the population. Of course, a legacy of unequal treatment of girls and women as well. Each of these is now being unraveled. It takes time. It's not just one or two policies. It will take missionary zeal, but there's urgency now in moving faster. India needs this urgency. It requires much higher growth and much deeper inclusivity, and the two go together. You cannot sustain high growth for 25 years, let alone 40 years, without much deeper inclusivity, and you cannot achieve inclusivity without higher growth. As Arun Jaitley put it in 2017, he asked the question, how do you fight poverty? And as he put it, you need a high level of growth. Growth brings in resources, and the policies of the state have to be aimed at achieving a high level of growth. It's absolutely necessary to tackle poverty and achieve inclusivity. But he also asked, will growth itself address or remove poverty? No, growth itself doesn't. You also need social activism, putting the poor at the forefront of thinking, of public consciousness, of policy, putting the poor at the forefront. And again, I know that Prime Minister Modi has been talking about this very recently. I will talk briefly about growth and jobs, and then I will talk about inclusivity. And I will not cover the ground comprehensively in the interest of time, but let me first say that India is not going to be able to achieve its economic or social ambitions in the next 25 years without substantially higher growth ambition. India must grow by at least 8 to 10% over the next 25 years, 8 to 10% a year. It is the only way in which it is going to be able to both lift average incomes and per capita income, as well as create many more jobs. To do both at the same time, to lift per capita income significantly, and to create many more jobs for a large young population, you need higher growth. and 8 to 10% is the minimum that has to be achieved in the next 25 years. We've seen in many developed economies, and even in China in the last 10 years, a situation where productivity is achieved at the expense of jobs. In fact, the employment rate in many developed countries has come down in the last 10 years. It has also come down in China. China has sustained high productivity growth, but the employment rate has come down. India does not have that luxury of choosing between productivity growth or job growth. You need the productivity growth because it's the only way in which incomes are going to grow, but you need a lot more job growth. And it can be achieved because that's what several East Asian economies did. In fact, for 40 years, growth of above 8% for 40 years, allowing for both productivity growth to be healthy and strong, and very significant job growth keeping pace with the growth in the working age population. It can be achieved in India. One of the reasons why it can be achieved is that there's wide disparity within India itself. There's tremendous divergence within India between the states that are doing well and the states that are lagging. And there must be ways of closing that divergence, achieving convergence within India. That itself will boost growth. Second, this huge opportunity to free up a large part of the population that is still stuck in low productivity activity in the rural sector. It's not as if people want to be stuck with low incomes. It requires major policy shift, major reform, and innovation in agriculture, and it can be achieved. Those are two very important reasons why we can aim for higher growth in India. And the soon-to-be implemented simplification of labor laws will also help greatly, because the labor laws effectively have been anti-job. They have kept a large part of the population in the informal sector and in very small firms, and India has been unable to achieve the scale economies required for both productivity growth and job growth to be higher. You can only achieve these ambitions with a strong focus on export-oriented manufacturing, a much stronger focus than there is today. And with a strong focus not just on jobs for the highly skilled, like those in the IT sector, but a strong focus on those who come in with low skills or come in with a moderate amount of skills. Because manufacturing has a way of taking in unskilled people and making them semi-skilled. And it's got a way of taking in semi-skilled people and making them more highly skilled over time. It has a ladder of skills. India has to use the opportunities in global markets to create many more jobs for the unskilled and the semi-skilled. And those opportunities are still plentiful. Don't believe those who say globalization is in retreat. It may no longer be expanding the way it used to be. You may not be getting that hyper pace of expansion, but the level of exports and imports today in goods of many forms is higher, much higher than it was 20 years ago. It may be stabilizing, but it's a huge market of opportunity for India. And it means being willing to specialize in what India is good at, going for an openness in trade and investment by local firms, investment by foreign direct investors. Openness really counts, because then you get the cheapest and best inputs, and you can be a competitive supplier to the world. It's what Germany does, for instance. A large manufacturing economy, they specialize. They specialize in components in which they have a dominating presence globally. They rely on inputs from the rest of the world, and they specialize in components which the rest of the world needs. It doesn't mean producing a whole product. It means specializing in critical components and having that pricing ability. India's success, already seen now in electronics, in vaccine manufacturing, shows the way forward. The PLI scheme, the Production-Linked Incentive Scheme, is working well, and it has to be expanded, with a special focus on labor-intensive industries. This can work for India. India can achieve. It can achieve and can become a leading export manufacturing nation. Agriculture is critical. We have to create better jobs in agriculture. And we know what the reforms required are. And it will require more R&D in higher yield crops, weather-resistant crops, and so on. But it's also very important in addressing the water crisis, because agriculture in India is taking a very large toll on water. 90% of all fresh water used in India is in agriculture. Globally, it's about 70% or close to 70%. 90% of all fresh water used is in agriculture. We need a far more efficient system of water use, precision irrigation, innovations that can improve soil quality. These are innovations that exist and need to be scaled up across the Indian agricultural sector. And it will raise incomes and free up people to move into urban areas for other types of jobs, including higher productivity jobs. And I want to also say that whilst the digital economy offers significant prospects for India in the next decade, 2 decades, perhaps 3 or 4 decades, because the world needs more software, and India's got an abundance of scientists and engineers and software developers who are good at this, that will still be a very small fraction of the workforce. It's a very small fraction of the workforce. We have to think of other services that can generate jobs. And tourism in India and the craft economy offer significant potential as well. India is still not tapping its full potential for tourism. It's a remarkable country to visit for people from anywhere in the world. I mean, natural attractions like Kaziranga in Assam, or Kutch in Gujarat, or Kumarakom in Kerala, diverse natural attractions, historic sites like Kushinagar in UP, Kumbakonam in Tamil Nadu, many sites, many experiences. I've just given you 5 or 6 examples, and I was only using those starting with the letter K. So you can imagine if I was to take the whole alphabet. It's a land of diversity, richness, and depth of historical heritage. Still not fully tapped. But likewise, the craft economy. There's a multitude of villages around India where you have craftspersons, men and women, weaving, doing pottery, doing craft of various forms. Some of them are farmers who spend part of their time doing this. It's a huge opportunity for developing non-farm incomes in India. That combination of tourism and developing the craft economy. Unique, differentiated products all over India. And I just wanted to highlight that opportunity. Finally, let me move to inclusivity, which underpins everything else. We must address the challenge of child stunting soon. It's still a major challenge. Almost 40% of Indian children are stunted. We know the causes: malnutrition, poor diets when young. Again, there's a reason for optimism because the recent programs that have been introduced are working well. Poshan Abhiyan, started in some states, has been working well, significant improvements in maternal health, and the recently launched Nutrition Smart Village initiative, which has to be scaled up across the country, offers promise, harnessing traditional recipes to give people better diets. But it's such an important investment. There's no public investment with higher long-term return than eradicating childhood stunting. Next, education. The new economic policy has been launched. It's extremely important, and basically, if I were to summarize what has to be done, there have been improvements in school enrollment, girls and boys, but quality is a big issue. Learning outcomes are a big issue. We know the evidence. Pradham and other Program is a major NGO that does very careful assessment of learning outcomes at different levels. Essentially, at Standard 5, almost 50% of the kids are unable to achieve Standard 2 levels of literacy and numeracy. And once you've been set back at that level, it's not easy to catch up. So we have to improve quality in our schools as a major objective. And again, here there's reason for optimism because Niti Aayog has been doing these educational quality index studies. And they find again that some places are improving much faster than others, including in the large states. Even amongst large states, some have been moving much faster than others in recent years. And the source of improvement is improved governance of education. How teachers are selected, how school leaders are appointed. It's governance. A public school system can achieve quality. I say this coming from Singapore because we have a very highly regarded education system. It's a public school system. None of the countries in the upper band of the annual PISA rankings, or once in 2 year PISA rankings, none of them have decentralized school systems. They all have public school systems or school systems that are coordinated by the public sector. And as India's enrollments have gone up, with a large increase in enrollments in the public schools, it is critical that we bring quality into the public school system. And finally, higher education needs reform. The Prime Minister just spoke about this recently again. Like many other countries in the world, and like China in fact, India's higher education system has been overly academically oriented. And it just hasn't prepared the vast majority of graduates for the working world. The large corporations take some of them in and then they put them through an additional year of training just to make them ready for work. But higher education has to have a stronger applied and skills orientation. And we need to follow that up through the years once people are in their career. Skills centers and skills-oriented universities are critical. I just came from one in Assam because at the suggestion of the Prime Minister, Singapore has been collaborating with the Assam state government to set up a skills center. These are all doable directions. We can achieve it. Reform education, improve governance, focus on skills. Let me conclude by saying something of a broader nature. I was listening recently to an outstanding musical performance by three of India's most accomplished classical musicians, Zakir Hussain, Kala Ramnath, Jayanti Kumarish, tabla, violin, veena. Traditions of both the North and South, the three of them came together. And they've been performing across the United States to full crowds. In fact, they're going to be performing in Singapore in a few weeks' time, and I will be there together with my wife. Now, they decided to call themselves, for the purpose of these performances, Triveni. Triveni named after Triveni Sangam, the mythical confluence of rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati. So they call themselves Triveni. And I was just listening to them, and I realized this was an unusual confluence, because it was not just about their individual genius, and they are musical geniuses, each of them. Each of them are geniuses. But it was not just the individual genius. As you listen to a performance of that nature, it's all about improvisation, as you know. Each of them listening to the other, teasing them a little bit, prompting them, taking over, co-creating and co-empowering. That's what it's about. It's a collective genius. India has no lack of individual top talents. It may be overrepresented internationally. But what it has to develop is that collective capability, co-empowerment, co-creation, and having a high degree of trust amongst each other. And that has to be the challenge co-empowerment and co-creation between the government and the private sector, together with NGOs, cooperatives, and people themselves, co-creation and co-empowerment between the center and the states and the panchayats, both at the district and village level, and co-empowerment amongst people themselves, across caste, across class, across faiths, across white and blue collar, across gender, girls and boys, mothers and fathers. Develop this collective capability for the next 25 years. That is India's promise. And if India succeeds, as I believe it will be not just uplifting 1/5 of the world's population, it will also be showing the way for many others. Thank you very much.
I thank Honorable Senior Minister from Singapore, Sri Tharman Shanmugaratnam, for this comprehensive inaugural lecture on India's journey towards growth with inclusivity and inclusivity with growth. अब मैं माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी से अनुरोध करूंगा कि वो हम सबको संबोधित करें।
नमस्कार। आज का दिन मेरे लिए अपूरणीय क्षति और असहनीय पीड़ा का दिन है। मेरे घनिष्ठ मित्र और जापान के पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री श्री शिंजो आबे अब हमारे बीच नहीं रहे हैं। आबा जी मेरे तो साथी थे ही, वो भारत के भी उतने ही विश्वसनीय दोस्त थे। उनके कार्यकाल में भारत जापान में उनके जो राजनीतिक संबंध थे हमारे, वो को नई ऊंचाई तो मिली ही। हमने दोनों देशों की साझी विरासत से जुड़े रिश्तों को भी खूब आगे बढ़ाया। आज भारत के विकास की जो गति है, जापान के सहयोग से हमारे यहाँ जो कार्य हो रहे हैं, इनके जरिए शिंजो आबे जी भारत के जनमन में सालों तक बसे रहेंगे। मैं एक बार फिर दुखी मन से मेरे दोस्त को श्रद्धांजलि देता हूं। साथियों, आज का ये आयोजन मेरे और एक घनिष्ठ मित्र अरुण जेटली जी को समर्पित है। बीतों दिनों को याद करते हैं तो उनकी बहुत सारी बातें, उनसे जुड़े बहुत से वाक्य स्वाभाविक रूप से याद आते हैं। और यहां बहुत सारे उनके पुराने साथी मैं देख रहा हूं। उनकी ऑरेटरी हम सब उसके कायल थे, और उनके वन लाइनर लंबे अरसे तक हवा में घूमते रहते थे। उनका व्यक्तित्व विविधता से भरा था और उनका स्वभाव सर्वमित्र वाला था। यहां जितने भी लोग दिखते हैं, हर एक की अलग अलग दुनिया है, लेकिन सब अरुण के मित्र थे। ये अरुण के सर्वमित्र की विशेषता थी। और उनके व्यक्तित्व की इस खूबी को सभी आज भी याद करते हैं और हर कोई अरुण की कमी महसूस करता है। मैं अरुण जेटली जी को अपनी विनम्र श्रद्धांजलि देता हूं। साथियों, अरुण जी की स्मृति में इस लेक्चर का जो विषय रखा गया है, ग्रोथ थ्रू इंक्लूसिविटी, इंक्लूसिविटी थ्रू ग्रोथ, वो सरकार की डेवलपमेंट पॉलिसी का मूल मंत्र है। मैं थर्मन जी का विशेष रूप से आभारी हूं कि उन्होंने हमारे निमंत्रण को स्वीकार किया, और मैंने कई बार उनको सुना भी है, उनको मैं पढ़ता भी रहता हूं। उनकी बातों में, उनके अध्ययन में, वो सिर्फ भारत में ही बोलते हैं तब नहीं, दुनिया के अन्य देशों में भी जब जाते हैं तो काफी रिसर्च करते हैं। लोकल टच उनकी हर एकेडमिक थिंकिंग में, उनकी फिलोसॉफी में बहुत सटीक तरीके से वो उसको नीट करते हैं। आज भी हम सबने अनुभव किया, बहुत ही अच्छे ढंग से उन्होंने वैश्विक परिस्थिति से लेकर के हमारे देश के बच्चों तक हमें ले आए। मैं उनका बहुत आभारी हूं, उन्होंने समय निकाला। साथियों, जिस विषय पे यहां चर्चा हो रही है, जिस विषय को लेकर के आज अरुण जेटली व्याख्यान माला का हमारा प्रारंभ हुआ है, अगर मैं इसी को सरल भाषा में कहूं तो एक प्रकार से ये थीम, मेरी सीधी सादी भाषा में मैं कहूंगा, सबका साथ सबका विकास। लेकिन इसके साथ ही इस लेक्चर की थीम आज के पॉलिसी मेकर्स के सामने आ रही चुनौतियां और दुविधाओं को भी कैप्चर करती है। मैं आप सभी से एक प्रश्न पूछना चाहता हूं, क्या बिना इंक्लूजन के सही ग्रोथ संभव है? आप अपने आप को पूछिए, क्या बिना ग्रोथ के इंक्लूजन के बारे में सोचा भी जा सकता है? क्या हेड ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट के तौर पर मुझे 20 साल से भी अधिक समय से काम करने का अवसर मिला है, और मेरे अनुभवों का सार यही है कि बिना इंक्लूजन के रियल ग्रोथ संभव ही नहीं है, और बिना ग्रोथ के इंक्लूजन का लक्ष्य भी पूरा नहीं किया जा सकता। और इसलिए हमने ग्रोथ थ्रू इंक्लूसिविटी का रास्ता अपनाया, सबके समावेश का प्रयास किया। बीते 8 वर्षों में भारत ने इंक्लूजन के लिए जिस स्पीड के साथ काम किया है, जिस स्केल पर काम किया है, वैसा उदाहरण आपको पूरी दुनिया में कभी भी नहीं मिलेगा। बीते 8 साल में भारत ने 9 करोड़ से ज्यादा महिलाओं को मुफ्त गैस कनेक्शन दिया है। 9 करोड़। ये संख्या साउथ अफ्रीका, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, सिंगापुर, न्यूजीलैंड, इसकी सारी आबादी को भी जोड़ दें तो उससे भी ज्यादा होती है। यानी आप स्केल देखिए, बीते 8 साल में भारत ने 10 करोड़ से ज्यादा टॉयलेट बनाकर गरीबों को दिए हैं। थर्मन जी ने इसका बड़ा पैशन होकर के उल्लेख किया। यह संख्या साउथ कोरिया की कुल आबादी के 2 गुने से भी ज्यादा है। बीते 8 साल में भारत ने 45 करोड़ से ज्यादा जनधन बैंक अकाउंट खोले हैं। ये संख्या भी जापान, जर्मनी, ब्रिटेन, इटली, मैक्सिको, इनकी टोटल पॉपुलेशन से भी करीब करीब उसके बराबर है। बीते 8 साल में भारत ने गरीबों को 3 करोड़ पक्के घर बनाकर दिए हैं। और मुझे याद है, एक बार आप ही के मंत्रिपरिषद के साथ ही ईश्वरन से मेरी बात हो रही थी, सिंगापुर के मिनिस्टर, जब मैं उनको ये स्केल बताता रहा हाउसिंग का, तो ईश्वरन ने मुझे कहा तो आपको तो हर महीने एक नया सिंगापुर बनाना पड़ेगा। मैं आपको ग्रोथ थ्रू इंक्लूसिविटी, इंक्लूसिविटी थ्रू ग्रोथ का एक और उदाहरण देना चाहता हूं। भारत में कुछ साल पहले हमने आयुष्मान भारत योजना शुरू की थी, जिसका उल्लेख थर्मन जी ने किया, और आने वाले प्रमुख सेक्टर में उन्होंने हेल्थ सेक्टर की चर्चा भी की है। इस योजना की वजह से 50 करोड़ से ज्यादा गरीबों को अच्छे से अच्छे अस्पताल में और हिंदुस्तान में कहीं भी 5 लाख रुपए तक का मुफ्त इलाज मिलना सुनिश्चित हुआ है। 50 करोड़ लोगों को 5 लाख रुपए तक मुफ्त इलाज। बीते 4 साल में आयुष्मान भारत की वजह से देश के 3.5 करोड़ से ज्यादा लोगों ने अपना मुफ्त इलाज कराया है। हमने इस योजना में इंक्लूजन पर फोकस किया। गरीब से गरीब जो है, आखिर की पंक्ति में बैठा हुआ है, उसको भी आरोग्य के संबंध में आवश्यक अच्छी सुविधा मिले। और समय के साथ हमने देखा है, वो पहलू तो इंक्लूजन का है, लेकिन समय ने बताया है कि इससे ग्रोथ का रास्ता भी बनता चला गया। जो पहले एक्सक्लूडेड थे वो विकास की मुख्य धारा से जुड़े, तो डिमांड भी बढ़ी और ग्रोथ के लिए अपॉर्चुनिटी का भी विस्तार हुआ। जब भारत की 1/3 आबादी जो पहले बेहतर हेल्थ केयर की सुविधाओं से दूर थी, उसे इलाज की सुविधा मिली, तो इसका सीधा प्रभाव यह हुआ कि हेल्थ केयर कैपेसिटी को उसी हिसाब से खुद को मजबूत करना पड़ा। मैं आपको बताता हूं कि आयुष्मान भारत योजना ने कैसे पूरे हेल्थ केयर सेक्टर को ट्रांसफॉर्म कर दिया है। 2014 से पहले हमारे देश का औसत था, एवरेज 10 साल में करीब 50 मेडिकल कॉलेज बना करते थे। 10 साल में 50 मेडिकल कॉलेज, इतने बड़े देश में। जबकि भारत में पिछले 7-8 साल में पहले के मुकाबले 4 गुना से ज्यादा, यानी करीब करीब 209 नए मेडिकल कॉलेज बनाए गए हैं। अब आप कल्पना कर सकते हैं कि कहां 50 और कहां 209, और आने वाले अभी 10 साल का जब हिसाब लगाऊंगा तो ये मामला और आगे बढ़ने वाला है, वो 400 तक पहुंचने वाला है। बीते 7-8 साल में भारत में अंडर ग्रेजुएट मेडिकल सीट्स में 75% की बढ़ोतरी हुई है। भारत में अब एनुअल टोटल मेडिकल सीट्स की संख्या बढ़कर लगभग 2 गुना हो चुकी है। यानी अब देश को कहीं ज्यादा डॉक्टर मिल रहे हैं, देश में तेजी से आधुनिक मेडिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर निर्माण हो रहा है। इंक्लूसिवनेस के लिए लाई गई एक योजना का जमीन पर ग्रोथ की दृष्टि से भी इतना बड़ा प्रभाव हम बिल्कुल देख सकते हैं, हम उसको आंक सकते हैं। और मैं तो आपको ऐसी दर्जनों योजना गिना सकता हूं। भारत के डिजिटल इंडिया अभियान ने, जिसका उल्लेख भी थर्मन जी ने किया, लगभग 5 लाख कॉमन सर्विस सेंटर्स ने गांव में रहने वाले गरीब तक भी इंटरनेट की ताकत को पहुंचाया है। भारत के भीम यूपीआई ने करोड़ों गरीबों को डिजिटल पेमेंट की सुविधा से जोड़ा है। भारत की स्वनिधि योजना ने रेहड़ी पटरी वाले साथियों को बैंकिंग व्यवस्था से जुड़ने का अवसर दिया है। जो हमारे यहां नगर पालिका में, महानगर पालिका में जो रेहड़ी पटरी वाले होते हैं, जिनके साथ हमारा रोज का नाता होता है, बैंक मैनेजर होगा, उसके घर में रोज रेडी पटरी वाला माल देता होगा, लेकिन उसको बैंक में जगह नहीं होगी। यह हाल था। आज हमने इसको जोड़ दिया है। उसी प्रकार से भारत ने एक बहुत बड़ा काम किया है। दुनिया उस पर काफी कुछ इन दिनों जो अर्थशास्त्री लोग हैं वो लिख भी रहे हैं, बड़ी बड़ी एजेंसियां उसका रेटिंग भी कर रहे हैं। भारत का एक इनिशिएटिव है एस्पिरेशनल डिस्ट्रिक्ट प्रोग्राम। देश के 100 से ज्यादा जिलों में रहने वाले करोड़ों साथियों को अपलिफ्ट कर रहा है। और ये एस्पिरेशनल डिस्ट्रिक्ट की कल्पना ये है कि हिंदुस्तान के और जिलों की तुलना में जो पीछे रह गए हैं उनकी आकांक्षाओं को हम एड्रेस करें, उनको उस राज्य की टॉप पोजीशन की बराबरी तक ले आए और फिर धीरे धीरे उसको नेशनल टॉप की बराबरी तक ले आए। साथियों, इसका इतना बड़ा पॉजिटिव इंपैक्ट हुआ है और एक प्रकार से इन 100 डिस्ट्रिक्ट का इंक्लूजन हो रहा है डेवलपमेंट की दुनिया में। भारत की राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति और एक बहुत बड़ा पैराडाइम शिफ्ट है और शिक्षा पर भी थर्मन जी ने काफी बल दिया अपनी बातचीत में। भारत की राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति मातृभाषा में, मदर टंग में पढ़ाई पर जोर दे रही है। जो अंग्रेजी नहीं जानता, जो एक्सक्लूडेड है, उसे अब मातृभाषा में पढ़कर आगे बढ़ने का मौका मिलेगा। भारत की उड़ान योजना, इसने देश के, हमने कई हवाई पट्टियों को जीवंत कर दिया, नए एयरपोर्ट बनाए, दूर दूर टियर 2, टियर 3 सिटी में भी हम चले गए और उड़ान योजना लाए। एक फिक्स अमाउंट में हवाई जहाज में सफर की एक रचना की। भारत की उड़ान योजना ने देश के अलग अलग कोनों को हवाई मार्ग से जोड़ा है। गरीब को भी हवाई जहाज में उड़ने का हौसला दिया है और मैं कहता था हवाई चप्पल पहनने वाला भी अब हवाई जहाज में बैठेगा। यानी इंक्लूजन भी हो रहा है, ग्रोथ भी हो रहा है। उसी का परिणाम है आज भारत के में एविएशन सेक्टर का ग्रोथ इतना हो रहा है, 1000 से ज्यादा नए एयरक्राफ्ट के ऑर्डर बुक हुए हैं भारत के लिए। इस देश में 1000 से ज्यादा नए एयरक्राफ्ट खरीदा क्योंकि पैसेंजर वाला इंक्लूजन का जो हमारा अप्रोच रहा, उसी का परिणाम है। अभी थर्मन जी ने जिसकी बात की, जो मैं गुजरात में जिसको मैंने बहुत मुखरता से काम किया था, जल जीवन मिशन, देश के हर घर को पाइप वाटर सप्लाई से जोड़ रहा है, नल से जल। और उस सिर्फ वो पानी मिलता है नहीं, वो उसका समय बचाता है, कठिनाइयां बचाता है, हेल्दी कंडीशन के लिए वाटर की बहुत बड़ी भूमिका रहती है। उन सारे दृष्टि से ये मिशन बहुत बड़ा सामाजिक जीवन, और जिन्होंने बच्चों के न्यूट्रिशन का विषय किया उसका संबंध पानी से भी है। शुद्ध पानी, पीने का शुद्ध पानी, ये भी न्यूट्रिशन के लिए, बच्चों के लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण विषय है। और हमारा नल से जल अभियान उस इश्यू को भी एड्रेस करने वाला का एक बड़ा महाअभियान का हिस्सा है। सिर्फ 3 साल में ही इस मिशन ने 6 करोड़ से ज्यादा घरों को पानी के कनेक्शन से जोड़ा है। भारत में मोटे तौर पर लगाए हिसाब तो 25-27 करोड़ घर है, उसमें से 6 करोड़ घरों को पानी पहुंचा दिया है जी। ये इंक्लूसिवनेस आज देश के सामान्य मानवी का जीवन आसान कर रही है, उसे आगे बढ़ने का हौसला दे रही है। और किसी भी देश के विकास में इसका कितना महत्व है, ये आप अर्थ जगत के लोग जो यहां बैठे हैं वो भली भांति इस बात को जानते हैं। मैं आपको एक और उदाहरण देना चाहता हूं। आप भी जानते हैं, और ये तो मैंने देखा है कि यूएन में भी इसकी चर्चा होती है, एसडीजी में भी उसकी डेवलपमेंट गोल के अंदर इन मुद्दों पर चर्चा होती है। और वो कह रहा है दुनिया में दशकों से अनेक देशों में प्रॉपर्टी राइट्स ये बहुत बड़ा इश्यू बना हुआ है। और जब प्रॉपर्टी राइट्स की बात करते हैं तब समाज के जो आखिरी लोग होते हैं वो सबसे ज्यादा वनरेबल होते हैं, उनके पास कोई दस्तावेज नहीं होता है, सबसे ज्यादा मुसीबतें उनको झेलनी पड़ती है। लेकिन आपको जानकर के खुशी होगी कि भारत ने इस दिशा में जिस तेजी से काम किया है वो अभूतपूर्व है। और मैं मानता हूं दुनिया के एकेडमिशियन, दुनिया के इकोनॉमिस्ट इस विषय को अध्ययन करेंगे और दुनिया के सामने इस विषय को प्रस्तुत करेंगे कि स्वामित्व योजना के माध्यम से देश के ग्रामीण क्षेत्र में घरों और इमारतों की मैपिंग का काम बड़े पैमाने पर चल रहा है। अभी तक भारत के 1.5 लाख गांवों में ये काम हम ड्रोन की मदद से करते हैं। ड्रोन से सर्वे होता है और टेक्नोलॉजी का भरपूर उपयोग होता है और पूरा गांव वहां मौजूद रहता है जब ये सारी प्रोसेस होती है तब। और 1.5 लाख से अधिक कामों में ड्रोन से ये सर्वे पूरा किया जा चुका है और 37,000 स्क्वायर किलोमीटर, आप कल्पना करिए, ड्रोन के माध्यम से 37,000 स्क्वायर किलोमीटर जमीन की मैपिंग का काम हो चुका है, मतलब उन घरों से जुड़ी हुई जमीन वाला। और 80 लाख से ज्यादा लोगों के लिए प्रॉपर्टी कार्ड बनाए जा चुके हैं और ये भी जो मालिक है उसकी सहमति से होता है, उसके साथ विचार विमर्श होता है, उसके अड़ोस पड़ोस के लोगों के साथ विचार विमर्श होता है। एक लंबी प्रक्रिया है और इसका मतलब यह हुआ कि इससे गांव के लोगों को बैंक लोन मिलना आसान हुआ है, उनकी जमीन अब कानूनी विवादों से भी बच रही है। साथियों, आज का भारत रिफॉर्म्स बाय कंपल्सन के बजाय रिफॉर्म्स बाय कन्विक्शन से आने वाले 25 साल का रोड मैप तैयार कर रहा है। देश आजादी के 100 साल मनाएंगे तब देश कहां होगा, इस लक्ष्य को लेकर के हम आज रोड मैप बना करके आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। दशकों पहले देश ने ये देखा था कि जब कोई रिफॉर्म मजबूरी में होता है तो उसके इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज होने की उम्मीद कम रहती है। जैसे ही मजबूरी खत्म होती है वैसे ही रिफॉर्म भी बुला दिया जाता है। रिफॉर्म जितने जरूरी होते हैं उतना ही जरूरी वो एनवायरनमेंट होता है, मोटिवेशन होता है। पहले भारत में बड़े रिफॉर्म तभी हुए जब पहले की सरकारों के पास कोई रास्ता ही नहीं बचा था। हम रिफॉर्म्स को नेसेसरी इविल के रूप में नहीं बल्कि एक विन विन चॉइस के रूप में मानते हैं, जिसमें राष्ट्रहित भी है, जनहित भी है। इसलिए बीते 8 सालों में हमने जो भी रिफॉर्म्स किए, उन्होंने नए रिफॉर्म्स के लिए रास्ते तैयार किए हैं। अरुण जी आज यहां भी जहां भी होंगे वो संतुष्ट होंगे कि वो जिस मिशन में भागीदार रहे उसका लाभ आज देश को मिल रहा है। जीएसटी हो या आईबीसी, इनको लेकर सालों तक चर्चा हुई, आज इनकी सफलता हमारे सामने है। कंपनीज एक्ट को डीक्रिमिनलाइज करना हो, कॉरपोरेट टैक्सेस को कॉम्पिटिटिव बनाना हो, स्पेस, कोल माइनिंग और एटॉमिक सेक्टर्स में को खोलना हो, ऐसे अनेक रिफॉर्म आज 21वीं सदी के भारत की सच्चाई है। साथियों, हमारी पॉलिसी मेकिंग पल्स ऑफ द पीपल पर आधारित है। हम ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोगों को सुनते हैं, उनकी आवश्यकता, उनकी आकांक्षाओं को समझते हैं। इसलिए हमने पॉलिसी को पॉपुलिस्ट इंपल्सिस के दबाव में नहीं आने दिया। पीपल्स पल्स के अनुसार फैसले लेना और पॉपुलिज्म के सामने हथियार डाल देने में क्या फर्क होता है, ये कोविड काल में हिंदुस्तान ने देखा है और देखा है नहीं, दुनिया को दिखाया है। बड़े बड़े अर्थशास्त्री क्या कह रहे थे पैंडेमिक के समय? जब पैंडेमिक आई तो पूरी दुनिया में बड़े बेल आउट पैकेज के लिए, डिमांड ड्रिवन रिकवरी के लिए पॉपुलिस्ट इम्पल्स था, हम पर भी दबाव था और हमारी आलोचना होती थी, ये कुछ कर नहीं रहे, कुछ दे नहीं रहे, पता नहीं क्या कुछ हमारे लिए कहा गया। ये भी कहा गया